Hey fellow filmmakers, Clifton Stommel here. Today we're shooting close and wide in honor of reviewing our Laowa 12mm 0D cinema lens. Now while the 0D lens does cover a full frame sensor, we will be mostly focused on how it performs in a Super 35 sensor because this is a cinema lens and most cinema cameras are currently still Super 35. And a friendly reminder before we get started to go ahead and like and comment on any of the videos of mine that you find helpful, as well as hitting the subscribe button so that you'll get a notification when I post something new, and I know you're paying attention so I can make a lot more of these. All right, let's get to it. Alright, first things first, build quality. Laowa and honestly the whole Venus Optics family lens company is doing an amazing job with their lenses. The cinema versions of their lenses are always robust, full metal, there's no flimsy wiggling parts, there's like zero play whatsoever on the focus and the aperture rings. One of the things I really love that they have definitely nailed is this front cap situation. And there's no click, there's no locking mechanism, yet the suction of the little lip they have here keeps it from falling off. Again, my other cinema shooters definitely understand, I'm sure, the pain of your PL lenses constantly having those, front caps that are like a little bowl just falling off the front of your lens all the time. But Laowa's gone ahead and made this front cap out of metal, and they've made it just perfectly sized that it slips on without any sort of resistance and it doesn't fall off constantly while you're transporting it around. The whole lens is a lot smaller than you'd think. Now, of course, I'm kind of a giant, so in my hands, this probably looks even smaller, but this really isn't that big of a lens. For a 12mm lens that can cover a full frame sensor, you'd expect this would be quite a bit bigger than it is. But honestly, this is a very manageable size for how much lens you get. Now, one thing I really like about this lens is that the rear element doesn't protrude crazy far. You see this a lot with wide-angle cinema lenses, is that they have this, as I call the cone of shame, that extends kind of ridiculously far, which limits the kind of cameras you can attach it to, especially when you're looking at the Beza mod or other kind of PL adapters. Now, what's even cooler than this having a very, very short additional cone or dust blocker is that this one in particular can actually unscrew and be taken off completely, which if you need that little bit of extra flange depth, you can actually get that by simply removing this. Now, the reason that this is removable is actually to give you access to the internal mechanisms so that you can actually change the shims. Speaking of which, the Laowa 12mm comes with some really nice additional accessories in the box. Now, a lot of lenses only come with the product packaging that they're shipped with, or maybe like a little cloth bag, i.e. the Sigma Art series, which can be nice, but most cinematographers like to have a set of lenses in a hard case to take to and from set. And of course, when you're talking about things like master primes or a specialty lens, like a 12mm, it's nice to have a dedicated box just for that lens, since it's likely to go out by itself in a lot of rental kits or on productions. And of course, in the case comes some really valuable additional accessories. Now, to keep from boring you all to tears with an unboxing video, we'll keep this pretty brief. The 12mm lens comes with a set of shims, an owner's manual, which of course contains the diagram of how to take apart the back side of the lens and go ahead and get to those shims if you need to adjust and replace them, and an adapter ring that allows you to fit the lens to a standard 114mm matte box. Now, when it comes to optics on the 12mm 0D, I do really like the way that this lens looks. Of course, it does have a lot of character to it and it's not without imperfections, but from where I'm standing as a DP, I like my lenses to have a certain look or feel to them. It allows me to make projects have different sort of aesthetics that come from more than just the lighting and the set design. So for those of you who are looking for a particular kind of look, this may be a good way to go. But if you need a clean, hyper sharp, same all the way to the edges sort of lens, this may not be the one for you. However, for those of us who are looking for a kind of unique look to our project or want something to intercut with some other various interesting looking lenses, this is a really nice piece for your arsenal. One of the things I want to point out is when shooting wide open with this lens, the edges of the frame are going to pick up some extra kinds of imperfections, we'll say. Of course, 0D is a little bit of a misnomer because when they say 0D, i.e. zero distortion, what they mean is no barrel distortion. Now, for a lens this wide to show zero barrel distortion means that it does have some pretty aggressive aspherical lens elements in there. And what this does on the edges of your frame in particular is create this kind of stretched looking image on the sides that look sort of fanned out, which is great for architectural shots or interiors and doesn't pose much of an issue when doing close-ups of things like plants or other organic designs. However, when you put humans or animals too close to the edge of the frame, or something that you would notice might be skewed in a strange perspective, you will start to pick that up. So I'm sorry to say, for those of us who are very excited about the upcoming 12K, 16K, 32, 95K cameras, you're not gonna be able to simply throw on a wide angle lens, capture everything in one shot, and punch into various quadrants. Of course, that's not really a good way to tell a narrative story anyway, even if we did have the resolution and resolving power to accomplish it. So what is this lens best for? Well, interior architectural spaces, nature, follow shots, and of course, it's great for that Kubrickian super wide establishing shot, as well as what my friend Didier and I like to call the Spielberg push-in. A lens like this gives you a really great opportunity to create an amazing sense of motion and expansion as you move in towards a subject or pull out away from your subject to reveal the space around them. You can of course do some amazing things as well, like having a character very close to the frame, then be pulled really far back to really increase the sense of falling away from our audience or suddenly rushing up to. And of course, let's not forget the obligatory super wide lens thrown on a gimbal or Steadicam to capture follow shots, or of course, our music videos we love to see of someone performing in a space while we're sort of gliding and moving and flowing around them. I use my Tachyna 11-16 a lot for these kinds of projects and shots, and the 12mm 0D is a very nice fully cinema version that of course can cover a full frame, unlike the Tachyna. Speaking of minimum focus, the minimum focus on the 12mm 0D is 0.6 feet. Now we're talking about 7 or 8 inches off of the sensor plane. And when you include the length of the lens and the front of the camera, you're talking about literally an inch to an inch and a half off of the front glass of this lens. Venus Optics does also have that 24mm probe lens that gives you that crazy ant's perspective of the world. And with the exception, of course, of that lens being this big on the front, allowing it to get physically lower and closer to small objects, this lens's minimum focus is so close you could effectively have the same kind of view if you can fit it inside of something or if you can get it close enough to the base of what you're shooting. So you can get these really great up-close shots where you can make small interior spaces look like grand cathedrals, as well as the ability to focus at or even slightly past infinity. One of the things I really like about manufacturers that do this, with the lens focus going slightly past the infinity mark, is it allows you to compensate for any slight variations in your flange depth calibration. It does come with shims, however, you'll notice that your cinema camera that has a PL mount also has shims, so even if all of your lenses are back focused properly, if your camera's shims aren't correctly managed, you may end up in a situation where none of your lenses can reach infinity focus, or they're all slightly off on their focus markings. Very few of us are pulling focus these days using the markings on the lens. Sorry, old school cinematographers, I know you guys can do it, I've seen it, but the new generation of people are using monitors for almost all of the productions, and we rely on the video feed more than the actual markings on the lens. So to have a lens that can go a little past infinity, even if the marking is a little bit off, to be able to reach infinity and still get everything else in focus means we do have a usable lens under all circumstances. So what do I think about Laowa's 0D T2.9 cinema lens? Personally, I'm not hurting for a focal length wider than 16mm on my Super 35 sensor, but I do like a lens with a lot of character, and I'm very fond of being able to do something like what this lens can do in terms of getting a super specialty kind of shot. Some of the things that we filmed with this while we had it in our possession, I'm really happy with. And I could see maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 5 projects having at least one shot that uses this lens, which to me is enough to actually keep it in my arsenal. So for those of you who have a budget of $1,500 for a lens like this, it's probably worth the purchase. But for those of you who prefer to rent and definitely wouldn't invest in something that has such a specific and specialty use, this may not be the lens for you. But for those of us who like to be able to say yes to anything a client asks, of course I can get that shot. Here's a recommendation, or of course I have that piece of equipment. Here's how we can use it. This is a good thing to add to your arsenal. Thanks again for watching this video, and if you have any comments or questions, just go ahead and leave them in the comment section below the video. Also in the description underneath here, you'll see links to where you can buy this lens, as well as a lot of the equipment that I'm using here to film my YouTube videos. And those of you who subscribe, you'll get information and updates on what I'm posting. And of course, the more you guys subscribe, the more of these I can make. So please keep those subscribes coming, and I will continue reviewing gear and posting workflow videos for you guys as well. And Looking forward to seeing you guys next time. Thanks again.